The cameras roll, the lights buzz overhead, and the stage is set for the showdown. A live audience murmurs in anticipation as the debate between two of Washington's most powerful figures, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, hits the airwaves. Pelosi's sharp, commanding voice slices through the tension. The American people deserve more than empty promises and hollow rhetoric. Our national security isn't a pawn in your political games. We're talking about the safety of every single citizen, our children, our future, our sovereignty. Her words land like a fist. The audience sits in stunned silence, waiting for McConnell to react. He leans into the microphone, his eyes narrowing with defiance. With all due respect, Madam Speaker, your idea of national security is nothing more than a power grab. You want to weaken our defenses with your reckless spending. You're more interested in politics than protecting the American people. The room is electric with the clash of ideologies, two titans of American politics locked in a fierce, very personal battle. Pelosi's lips curl with contempt, her body language unwavering. McConnell, the ever-calculated strategist, meets her gaze with a smirk, sure of his words but unsure of the fallout. The cameras zoom in, capturing every flicker of emotion. Pelosi doesn't back down. You can hide behind your talking points all you want, Mitch, but we know who's really behind the curtain, those corporate donors and defense contractors who profit off war and division. You're playing games with lives. The audience's collective breath hitches. McConnell stiffens, his calculated composure cracking for a moment. He pauses, but just for a beat. His retort comes with venom. I'd rather play games with lives than sell out to foreign interests, Nancy. At least I'm putting America first. The atmosphere is thick with hostility. Every word, every movement feels like it could tip the balance. But what happened next sent shockwaves through the political world. The debate between Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell isn't just a clash of two powerful politicians, it's a battle for the future of America itself. On one side, Pelosi stands firm, fighting for a vision of national security that prioritizes diplomacy, strategic defense, and most of all, the well-being of American citizens. She champions policies that focus on intelligence, cybersecurity, and the prevention of threats before they reach American soil. For her, security isn't about building more walls, it's about building a stronger, more connected America, with allies, not enemies. McConnell, however, holds a vastly different perspective. His approach is grounded in military might, more spending on defense, more troops, more weapons. In his view, the world's greatest power should be the world's greatest military force, and America's strength must come from overwhelming force. Foreign policy for him is about maintaining dominance, keeping adversaries in check with power. His stance on homeland security reflects a more isolationist approach, closing borders, strengthening internal surveillance, and preparing for a future where America stands alone, defending itself from a world that's becoming increasingly unpredictable. The tension in the room builds as the audience watches these two figures represent two diverging futures for the nation. Pelosi's vision leans toward collaboration and preventive measures, advocating for cutting-edge intelligence and alliances. McConnell, on the other hand, pushes for a future where strength comes from military expansion and an uncompromising stance on security. But this isn't just about policy, it's about values. Pelosi's belief in diplomacy and a global approach to security puts her in direct opposition to McConnell's militaristic vision. While Pelosi advocates for a balanced approach, using all facets of national power to secure peace, McConnell's rhetoric screams dominance at any cost, regardless of the price. And so, the stakes couldn't be higher. This is no longer a debate about budgets or military spending. It's a fight over the soul of America's future. One path leads to a more interconnected, cooperative world, the other to isolation and a reliance on sheer force. The American people are watching. And as their voices grow louder, so does the pressure on both Pelosi and McConnell to stand firm on their positions. The clash over national security is no longer a policy debate, it's a battle of ideologies that could determine the country's place in the world for generations to come. But as the battle for the nation's safety escalates, an unexpected twist changes everything. Mitch McConnell's career is a testament to the old-school politics of power and pragmatism. A veteran of the Senate, McConnell has spent decades honing his craft, mastering the art of compromise, manipulation, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. But for all his political acumen, one thing has always been clear: McConnell's true loyalty lies with the defense industry, corporate interests, and maintaining the status quo. His commitment to national security, while loudly proclaimed, is more about political leverage than any real interest in safeguarding the nation's future. In the early days of his career, McConnell made a name for himself as a shrewd operator. He positioned himself as a defender of Kentucky, securing military contracts and defense spending for his state. Over the years, he became a staunch advocate for an expansive defense budget, one that saw trillions of dollars funneled into the military-industrial complex. For McConnell, national security wasn't just a policy, it was a multi-billion-dollar industry. His ties to defense contractors, many of whom became significant donors to his campaigns, have raised eyebrows for years. Critics argue that McConnell's approach to defense spending wasn't about the security of the nation, it was about securing his own political power and the prosperity of his benefactors. McConnell's political strategy is built on this idea of power consolidation. His method is simple: sow division, create a bogeyman, and then offer the solution. He portrays himself as the protector of American interests, especially in the face of foreign adversaries. But the truth is, his rhetoric often doesn't match the reality. McConnell has used the threat of foreign powers, whether it's China, Russia, or Iran, to justify ballooning defense budgets and military expansion. He's pushed for policies that escalate conflict, rather than de-escalate it, and his stance on national security has often mirrored the interests of the very defense contractors who fund his campaigns. But McConnell's approach isn't without its contradictions. On one hand, he calls for an increased military presence abroad, advocating for interventionist policies that position America as the world's police. On the other, he champions isolationist rhetoric, closing borders, cutting foreign aid, and reducing international engagement. It's a dangerous balancing act, one that doesn't take into account the complexities of modern geopolitics. While Pelosi advocates for alliances, diplomacy, and building coalitions with global partners, McConnell's policies seem focused solely on maintaining dominance through force. Yet, McConnell's true political motivations are shrouded in ambiguity. He insists that his defense spending initiatives are necessary to protect the American people, yet his past votes reveal a different story. For years, he supported cuts to social programs, education, healthcare, welfare, while pushing for larger military budgets. The priorities don't line up. McConnell's defense hawkishness clashes with his fiscal conservatism, and the American people are left to wonder, who does he really serve? The reality is, McConnell's actions rarely align with his words. His supposed commitment to security doesn't account for the long-term well-being of the American people. Instead, it's a calculated game, one in which the military-industrial complex is the big winner. Throughout his career, McConnell has perfected the art of playing the political game. He's the embodiment of a system that rewards corporate interests and punishes the people. In the Senate, he's managed to pit the American public against each other by framing national security as a choice between power and weakness. His strategy has always been to position himself as the tough-talking politician who knows how to get things done, even when it means using fear and division to maintain control. But with the rise of progressive politics and the growing dissatisfaction with the status quo, McConnell's carefully crafted image is starting to crack. His handling of national security has drawn increasing criticism, especially from younger generations who demand a more compassionate, diplomatic approach to global affairs. Pelosi's rhetoric on building alliances and focusing on intelligence is resonating with the public in a way McConnell never anticipated. The Senate leader's traditional methods of power consolidation no longer hold the same weight they once did, especially in a world that's rapidly changing. Yet McConnell refuses to back down. He continues to push the same agenda, defending policies that serve the military-industrial complex over the people. His stubbornness only deepens the divide between him and the growing wave of reformers who seek to reshape America's place in the world. Pelosi's progressive stance on national security stands in stark contrast to McConnell's hardened, corporate-backed vision, and the political world is taking notice. The question is, how long can McConnell keep up the facade? His strategies are no longer working as they once did, and his contradictions are becoming harder to ignore. But McConnell's long-held secrets were about to be exposed. Nancy Pelosi's rise to power was no accident. It wasn't the result of lucky breaks or backroom deals. It was the result of years of persistence, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief in a vision for America that prioritized its people over its politics. Growing up in a family steeped in public service, Pelosi learned early that the path to change was long and fraught with obstacles. But she never backed down. She never let the system define her. Instead, she worked tirelessly to redefine what it meant to be a leader in Washington, always holding fast to the principles of justice, equality, and transparency. Her early years in politics were shaped by her deep-rooted commitment to civil liberties. As the daughter of Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., a former mayor of Baltimore, Pelosi was introduced to the intricacies of governance at an early age. Her father's work had shown her that government could be a tool for progress, when wielded responsibly and with integrity. This lesson would guide her throughout her career. But Pelosi was more than just the daughter of a political figure. She was a trailblazer in her own right, breaking barriers as one of the first women to hold powerful positions in Congress. Her rise was a reflection of her hard work and her ability to build relationships, even with those who didn't always share her progressive views. As the first woman to serve as Speaker of the House, Pelosi's tenure marked a historic moment for the United States. But it wasn't just the symbolism of her election that mattered, it was the substance. Pelosi's leadership was defined by her ability to navigate the tumultuous waters of Washington, all while holding firm to her belief that national security must be rooted in transparency, human dignity, and the protection of civil rights. In her view, national security wasn't about isolating America or expanding military might, it was about ensuring that the country remained true to its values, both domestically and internationally. And she was willing to fight for that vision, no matter the cost. Throughout her time in the House, Pelosi became a staunch advocate for civil liberties, particularly in the wake of the post-9/11 security measures that many felt violated the very principles America was founded on. While many in Washington were quick to push for stronger, more invasive national security policies in the name of preventing terrorism, Pelosi stood firm in her belief that the government's first duty was to protect the rights of its citizens. She voted against the Patriot Act, calling it an overreach that compromised the privacy and freedoms of Americans. For Pelosi, national security wasn't about surveillance, it was about safeguarding democracy from the very forces that sought to erode it. Her fights for civil liberties didn't end there. Over the years, Pelosi led efforts to push back against policies she saw as harmful to the American people. Whether it was opposing the Iraq War, advocating for healthcare reform, or defending the Affordable Care Act against Republican attacks, Pelosi stood as a bulwark against policies that she believed prioritized corporate interests over the well-being of ordinary Americans. She wasn't afraid to speak out, even when it meant going against her own party, and she wasn't afraid to stand up to the most powerful forces in Washington. But it was her fight for national security reform that truly defined her legacy. Pelosi's vision for national security reform was simple: America's safety should never come at the cost of its values. For too long, she believed, the conversation had been dominated by fear-mongering and political theater, where leaders on both sides of the aisle used national security as a means to push through policies that benefited the elite, not the people. Pelosi's approach was different. She called for an emphasis on intelligence gathering, diplomacy, and international cooperation rather than military intervention and escalation. In her eyes, America's security wasn't just about maintaining a strong military, it was about maintaining strong relationships with allies, building coalitions, and leading with moral clarity on the global stage. This approach made her a target for many in the Republican Party, who saw her vision as naive and weak. But Pelosi didn't flinch. She knew that the only way to protect America's future was to build a national security strategy that aligned with the country's founding principles, not one that sacrificed them for short-term gain. She argued that true security didn't come from bombarding other nations, it came from creating a world where peace, not war, was the default. She championed diplomacy and international cooperation, working tirelessly to rebuild the alliances that had frayed over the years under Republican leadership. Pelosi's stance on national security reform also set her apart from many in her own party. While her progressive colleagues often advocated for more aggressive policies, Pelosi understood the delicate balance between security and liberty. She believed in the importance of addressing threats but also in the necessity of holding accountable those who abuse the power given to them in the name of protection. This nuanced understanding of security, grounded in her values of justice and human rights, was what set her apart. She wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, whether it came from the right or the left. For Pelosi, the fight for national security reform was not just about policy, it was about protecting the soul of the nation. Her commitment to transparency and government accountability, especially when it came to issues of national security, made her an increasingly rare figure in Washington. While McConnell and others were busy courting defense contractors and corporate donors, Pelosi was listening to the people. She stood by her belief that a democracy could only be strong if it was built on trust, and that trust could only be maintained through transparency and ethical governance. But despite her successes and her unflinching stance on security, Pelosi was about to face her greatest challenge yet. The stakes were higher than ever, and the political landscape was shifting. McConnell, with his unwavering commitment to military expansion, was pushing back harder than ever, and Pelosi's vision was at risk of being drowned out by the growing tide of fear and division. Her moment of reckoning was near, and she wasn't backing down. The temperature in the room rises, thick with the clash of two ideologies. Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are no longer just debating policy, they're engaged in a war of words that cuts to the heart of America's future. Every exchange is loaded with a mixture of sharp rhetoric, disdain, and personal history. The stakes, once abstract, have now become painfully clear. Pelosi opens the floor again, her voice steady but her words laced with an emotional urgency. What we're talking about here isn't just spending on military contracts. It's about how we, as a nation, prioritize the lives of our citizens. It's about how much we value the safety of every single person who calls this country home, not just the defense contractors and lobbyists you've made deals with. McConnell's eyes narrow, his lips barely moving as he responds, his words cold and calculated. Nancy, you're more concerned about virtue signaling than actual security. You think that cutting the military's budget will make America safer? You want to tear down what has kept us strong for decades in the name of progressivism. It's reckless. The audience reacts, some murmuring in agreement with Pelosi, others shifting uncomfortably at McConnell's sharp, biting retort. The cameras zoom in on Pelosi, catching the flash of frustration in her eyes. I'm not virtue signaling, Mitch. I'm speaking on behalf of the American people who want a future where war isn't the default option. We've seen where military expansion has gotten us, decades of endless wars, trillions of dollars spent, and more American lives lost. That is the reality of your defense-first agenda. McConnell doesn't flinch. He leans in closer, his voice cutting through the tension with a sharpness that echoes in the silence of the room. And what would you have us do, Nancy? Open our doors to every foreign adversary, dismantle our military, and leave us vulnerable? You're so caught up in your idealistic dream of world peace that you've lost touch with the reality of global power struggles. Pelosi's expression hardens, her hands clasped tightly on the podium. I want a world where America leads with diplomacy, where we don't rely on bombs to assert our power. Where national security is about preventing violence, not perpetuating it. Where we protect our citizens and our values. McConnell's response is swift, and though his words are measured, the venom is clear. The world doesn't work that way, Nancy. And you know it. As long as we're weak, they'll take advantage of us. That's what your fantasy world overlooks. The reality is that power speaks louder than words. And America has to maintain its strength, whether you like it or not. The crowd is divided now, some visibly nodding at McConnell's words, others shaking their heads, clearly swayed by Pelosi's emotional appeal. The tension in the room is palpable as the debate spirals further into personal jabs. Pelosi's voice rises, filled with a mixture of frustration and resolve. Strength isn't just about how big your military is, Mitch. It's about how you treat your own people. It's about whether you can protect them from the threats here at home, poverty, inequality, and the growing division you're fostering. McConnell scoffs, his tone dripping with disdain. You've always had your head in the clouds, Nancy. I'm talking about real threats, the ones that endanger our sovereignty. You're talking about things that don't even make it on the radar of national security. Pelosi's eyes burn with the fire of a woman who's fought her entire life for this moment. I'm talking about the threats you refuse to see, Mitch. We've spent years and billions of dollars playing catch-up because you refuse to see the real dangers. We've ignored cyber threats, climate change, the erosion of civil rights. And all you do is shout about more guns and more walls, while our real enemies, like corruption and inequality, are growing stronger by the day. The room is on edge now, the air thick with a growing sense of urgency. Each side is locked in their own version of reality, unwilling to budge, unwilling to give an inch. The debate has gone from a policy discussion to a battle for the very soul of the nation. As the debate reaches a fever pitch, public opinion begins to shift. Social media explodes with commentary, hashtags trending in both Pelosi's and McConnell's favor. The public, divided by party lines, weighs in heavily. The mainstream media picks up on every moment, framing each word as though it were the beginning of a larger fight for America's soul. But the real fight isn't just between Pelosi and McConnell, it's between two competing visions for what America can and should become. Pelosi's call for a safer, more just world clashes head-on with McConnell's insistence that America's future lies in military dominance and fear. And then, in the heat of the moment, something unexpected happens. McConnell, known for his steady control, falters. A moment of hesitation, a crack in his armor. Pelosi doesn't miss it. Her voice rises once more, unwavering. As the battle for the nation's safety escalates, an unexpected twist changes everything. The tension in the room reaches its apex, every eye fixed on the two figures locked in an ideological standoff. Pelosi, standing with a quiet but unwavering intensity, feels the weight of history pressing down on her. The stakes are no longer just about policy. This debate, this moment, is about something far more significant, the future of America's soul. McConnell, sensing the pressure mounting, shifts slightly. He tries to maintain his confident posture, but there's a subtle shift in his demeanor. It's as though the calculated mask he's worn for years is beginning to crack. Pelosi sees it, and she pounces. She leans into the microphone, her voice cool but dripping with conviction. You talk about strength, Mitch, but let's be clear about what that really means. You see national security as something to be bought and sold to the highest bidder. Your so-called tough stance on defense is nothing more than a facade, a way to pad your pockets with corporate dollars, all while telling the American people that more weapons, more walls, more conflict is the answer. The room falls silent. McConnell's face tightens as Pelosi's words hit home. He opens his mouth to respond, but she continues, cutting him off with surgical precision. Let's talk about your record, Mitch. You've spent decades in this Senate, building an empire of defense spending that has bled this country dry. You've fought for bigger budgets, more weapons, but at what cost? While you line the pockets of defense contractors, our veterans are living on the streets, and communities across this nation are grappling with failing schools and healthcare systems on the brink of collapse. Pelosi pauses, letting the weight of her words sink in. The audience is hanging on her every syllable. McConnell, visibly rattled, tries to interrupt, but Pelosi raises a hand, signaling for him to hold his fire. I'm not finished, Mitch, she says, her tone firm but unyielding. For years, you've argued that America's military might is what makes us safe. But what have you really done for the people who make this country great? You've been too busy shaking hands with defense CEOs to listen to the concerns of ordinary citizens. You've sold out our future for a bloated defense budget that doesn't keep us safe, it keeps the military-industrial complex alive. She steps forward slightly, her eyes locking onto McConnell with an intensity that leaves him momentarily speechless. You want to talk about national security? Let's talk about what actually makes us secure. It's not just bombs or drones. It's healthcare. It's education. It's fighting climate change, ensuring that every citizen has access to clean water, and that our democracy remains intact. Real security is rooted in our people, Mitch, not in endless wars and unchecked spending. The crowd is on edge, watching McConnell's face flush with a mixture of indignation and frustration. His usual cool composure is slipping, and Pelosi can sense the opening. She presses on, voice rising with the righteous fury of someone who has spent a lifetime fighting for those who have been left behind. You call yourself a patriot, Mitch, but let me ask you this. How many Americans have died because of your decisions? How many of them will continue to suffer as you fight for more weapons, more surveillance, more control? You've made a career out of telling people that their pain is the price of freedom, but let me tell you something. The price of freedom is not watching your neighbors suffer while you continue to enrich yourself and your corporate donors. The room is electric, the energy shifting in Pelosi's favor. Her words are sharp, calculated, but grounded in a deep moral clarity that contrasts sharply with McConnell's cold, mechanical responses. It's clear now, Pelosi isn't just talking about policy, she's talking about the very principles upon which this country was founded. Let's get real, Mitch, she says, her voice steady but with a quiet power that resonates with the audience. You've spent decades waving the flag of national security while chipping away at the freedoms that make America great. You've sold this country a bill of goods, telling them that more weapons and more surveillance will make them safe, but what you really mean is more power for you and your donors, more control for the people who've kept you in office for all these years. She looks out at the audience, her gaze sweeping the room. This is not about national security. This is about power. And you know it. You've used fear to keep people in line, to keep them voting for the very system that's crushed their dreams. You've made a career out of making them believe that their security depends on more spending and more war. But I'm here to tell you, Mitch, this is not how we secure America. This is how we destroy it. There's a pause, a silence that feels almost reverent. Pelosi has stripped McConnell bare, revealing the ugly truth behind his hawkish rhetoric. For a brief moment, McConnell stands there, his face unreadable, as if processing the magnitude of what has just happened. He opens his mouth to respond, but Pelosi isn't finished yet. Do you want to know what true national security looks like? Pelosi continues, her voice softer now, but just as powerful. It looks like ensuring that every person, no matter their background, no matter their zip code, has access to the resources they need to thrive. It looks like giving our children a future where they don't have to fight in wars of choice, where they can grow up in a world that values peace over power. True national security is not about militarizing our society, it's about humanizing it. The words hang in the air, heavy with the truth Pelosi has just revealed. McConnell, for the first time in this debate, is visibly shaken. He shifts uncomfortably, his usual smug confidence nowhere to be found. Pelosi, sensing her victory, takes a deep breath and steadies herself. She's delivered the blow, and it's clear that McConnell has no response. But McConnell's response? That's when things took a dramatic turn. The debate had barely ended when the world began to react. What had started as a tense exchange between two political titans had quickly spiraled into something far bigger, a viral moment that captured the attention of every corner of the political spectrum. The shockwaves rippled through social media, news outlets, and the American public, igniting conversations across the nation and beyond. On Twitter, Pelosi's words dominated the trending topics, flooding timelines with hashtags like hashtag Pelosi wins, hashtag McConnell exposed, and hashtag real security. Clips of her mic drop counterattack were shared thousands of times, with users praising her for finally exposing McConnell's contradictions. The hashtag truth over power quickly became a rallying cry for those who believed Pelosi had delivered a much-needed reality check on the state of national security. The viral moment wasn't just about a debate, it was about a shift in the political landscape, one where the status quo was being questioned in ways it hadn't been before. McConnell, on the other hand, found himself at the center of a storm he wasn't prepared for. His response, which had once been polished and calculated, now seemed flat and defensive. On Twitter, the reactions were swift and unforgiving. The hashtag McConnell defended the military industry trended briefly, but it was quickly overshadowed by the flood of content calling out his ties to defense contractors and his failure to address the real security concerns of American citizens. The memes began to flood in, images of McConnell with cartoonish dollar signs in his eyes, mock-ups of him shaking hands with CEOs of defense companies, and even parody videos highlighting his defeat in the debate. The news media had a field day. Cable networks scrambled to air replays of Pelosi's devastating takedown, with pundits dissecting every word she had said. CNN ran a segment on the Pelosi moment, calling it a defining moment in American politics. MSNBC broadcasted an emergency panel to discuss whether McConnell's defense-first approach was finally losing its grip on the nation's conscience. Even Fox News, which had staunchly defended McConnell in the past, couldn't ignore the fact that the debate had exposed serious flaws in his argument. Pelosi has struck a chord with a growing segment of the population that is tired of empty rhetoric and war-driven policies, said one political analyst. For McConnell, this is a reckoning. His defense of the military-industrial complex is no longer going unnoticed, and the people are calling him out. As the debate clip spread like wildfire, it became clear that the nation was split. On one side, Pelosi was hailed as a hero who stood up against the machine, someone who understood that true security came from safeguarding American values, not increasing military spending. On the other side, McConnell's defenders were quick to claim that Pelosi's vision of security was naive, and that her words would only lead to weakness on the world stage. But the deeper the divisions ran, the clearer it became that the debate wasn't just about policy, it was about identity. It was about what America stood for, what it valued, and who was leading it. Polls started to emerge, showing a dramatic shift in public opinion. A recent survey indicated that Pelosi's favorability had spiked by 10 points, while McConnell's numbers had dropped. Voters were beginning to see her as a moral leader who was willing to challenge the system, whereas McConnell's position appeared to be increasingly aligned with the corporate elite, a fact that was starting to turn off voters from both sides of the aisle. Outside of social media and news channels, the viral aftermath was felt at dinner tables, in offices, and on street corners. Across the nation, ordinary Americans were debating the implications of what had been said. In coffee shops in Chicago, in diners in Iowa, and on college campuses in California, people were engaging in impassioned discussions about the future of national security, the role of military spending, and the kind of America they wanted to build. Pelosi's emotional appeal resonated particularly with younger voters, many of whom felt disconnected from the traditional political machine. Her call for a world where diplomacy and international cooperation were at the heart of America's security resonated deeply with a generation that had grown up in the shadow of endless wars and economic uncertainty. McConnell's approach, which prioritized military expansion over social services, now seemed out of touch with the changing values of the electorate. On the other hand, McConnell's base, older voters and those with a more traditional view of national security, began to circle the wagons, defending him as the strong leader America needed in an increasingly unstable world. But the backlash was unmistakable. His defense of the status quo was beginning to sound hollow, even to some of his staunchest supporters. Media outlets kept the narrative going. Every major network covered the fallout. Pelosi's defenders held town halls, discussing her vision for a new, security-first future. At the same time, McConnell's supporters began to mobilize, rallying around his message of military dominance. But despite the efforts of both sides to spin the narrative in their favor, the momentum seemed to be with Pelosi. As the weekend passed and the shockwaves continued to reverberate, the nation remained in suspense. What would McConnell's next move be? Would he double down on his defense-first rhetoric, or would he try to salvage his position by softening his stance? But what happened behind the scenes shocked everyone. The public fallout from the debate had reached a fever pitch. McConnell's defense of military spending and his association with the defense industry had come under the harshest scrutiny of his career, but Pelosi was determined not to let the conversation end with just a political win. She knew that this moment of rare clarity, had the potential to change the course of history, not just in terms of national security, but for the very soul of the nation. The next day, Pelosi addressed the nation in a speech that would resonate far beyond Washington's halls. She stood in front of a crowd, her voice calm but firm, as the weight of her words seemed to fall on the hearts of every American listening. "Last night, we didn't just have a debate," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd, "we had a reckoning. A reckoning that reminded us all that national security isn't just about bombs, guns, and walls. It's about the security of our democracy. The security of our values. The security of the promise we make to each and every American that they are entitled to a life of dignity, opportunity, and peace." Her words were measured, but they carried the weight of truth. Pelosi had reframed the entire debate, not as one of military might versus diplomacy, but as one about transparency and accountability in a system that often favored power over the people. She called on Americans, from all walks of life, to stand up and demand more from their leaders, not just in terms of national defense, but in terms of their role in building a society that was equitable, just, and secure for all. "It's time to stop letting fear drive our policies," she said, her voice rising with passion. "It's time to stop treating our citizens as pawns in a game of military dominance. It's time to put people over profits. We must hold our elected officials accountable, no matter their party, when they prioritize defense contracts over healthcare, when they spend billions to build walls instead of schools, when they let corporations dictate our policies, while leaving American families behind." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her as she spoke, and for the first time, there was a sense of hope in the air, a sense that change was not just a dream, but a tangible possibility. Pelosi's words cut through the noise of partisan politics, reaching into the hearts of those who had long felt ignored, unheard, and overlooked by the system. "National security doesn't just come from the strength of our military," she continued, "it comes from the strength of our communities. It comes from knowing that our children have access to education, that our families can rely on affordable healthcare, and that our neighbors don't have to fear for their future. It comes from transparency, from honest government, from a willingness to put the welfare of the people before the interests of the elite." The emotional charge in the room was palpable. Pelosi's message wasn't just about national security, it was about reclaiming the promise of democracy. It was a call to action for every citizen, every voter, to stand up and be part of the solution. She was no longer just a leader advocating for policy changes, she was a leader challenging the American people to become active participants in shaping their own future. "We are at a crossroads," she said, her voice softening but filled with conviction. "We can choose to continue down the path of endless wars, of broken promises, and of a government that serves the powerful few. Or we can choose to build something better, a future where our security comes from the strength of our values, from our commitment to democracy, and from our willingness to fight for what's right." As Pelosi concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. But this wasn't just applause for a politician, it was applause for a movement. A movement that transcended party lines, that united people with different perspectives under the banner of justice, transparency, and accountability. It was a movement that called on the American people to step up and demand better from their leaders, to stop accepting the status quo, and to work together to build a future that was truly secure, not just in terms of defense, but in terms of opportunity, equality, and freedom. The news outlets that had once focused on the drama of the debate now turned their attention to Pelosi's message. Social media buzzed with excitement, as people shared her words, discussing her vision for a new America, a safer America, one that could finally put people's needs first. The hashtags that had once supported McConnell's defense-first rhetoric now gave way to new calls for reform, for change, for a new approach to national security. The political landscape was shifting, slowly but surely, as more and more Americans began to see the truth in Pelosi's message. The idea that national security was more than just military power, that it was about the security of our values, our democracy, and our future, began to take hold. But Pelosi knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, and the forces of fear and division would fight hard to hold on to the old ways. Yet, as she stood before the crowd, she knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and the American people were ready to nurture them. In the end, it wasn't just a victory for Pelosi, it was a win for the American people. The fight for national security had become a fight for the soul of the nation, and the people had spoken. They were ready for a future where security meant more than just bombs and walls, it meant the promise of a better tomorrow for everyone. As the dust settles from the debate, one thing becomes clear: the future of America's national security depends not just on politicians like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, but on each and every one of us. This moment, this debate, has shown that true security is not just about military might or defense budgets, it's about accountability, transparency, and a government that works for the people, not just the powerful few. We've witnessed a call for change, a demand for a national security strategy that reflects the values we hold dear: justice, fairness, and dignity for all. Pelosi's message has resonated because it's not just a political vision, it's a moral one. It's a vision for an America where security is built on the strength of our communities, our values, and our commitment to the future. But the fight doesn't end here. The battle for a more secure, more just America is far from over. The political drama is just beginning, and now, it's time for you to play your part. The change we seek starts with each of us holding our leaders accountable, demanding transparency, and pushing for policies that truly serve the people. So, if you believe in a future where national security means more than just power, it means the protection of our democracy, our values, and our future, then it's time to take action. Join the movement, subscribe now and be part of the fight for a stronger, more secure America. Share this video, stay informed, and never stop fighting for a future that reflects the best of who we are. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can reshape America's destiny.